Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. In today's video, I'll be taking a look at my early transfer plans ahead of Game Week 25. Welcome back everyone to another video. Now, if you did enjoy today's video, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like. And if you're new around here, I would appreciate it if you could hit subscribe as well. Let's start off by taking a look at my performance in Game Week 24 so far. I've actually got 2 players left to play on the Monday evening. Most FPL managers, I think, are almost all out. A few people have Mukiele maybe as their last man yet to play in the Sunderland-Burnley game. But I've got Dubravka and Alderete. And I'm just about on a red arrow. I think it's by about a point. With those 2 left to play, I'm optimistic at least that I can make it a green arrow and hopefully land myself somewhere within the top 300k. I'm ambitious. I would love to be 250k going into Game Week 25, but I'm also realistic. These are not my best 2 players in my 11. I would be happy enough if they scored me anything north of 5 or 6 points between them, and that would probably put me up in a reasonable position with a decent green arrow. 57 points so far. There's a question mark about whether Rodgers picked up a yellow card or not. I have to admit, I didn't watch the match live. It came up on the app saying he got a yellow card. It hasn't been logged. I don't know whether it was in error. He might go down to 1 point, but it's not going to make much difference because he's quite well owned anyway. Looking around my team, SAKA is the one that we really need to talk about in this video. He has been such a painful player to own this season. Week after week, I've found an excuse to keep him, and I'm running out of them, quite frankly. He has been awful, and I was determined that this could be the week that it finally pays off. He looked absolutely locked in to start, was named in the starting 11, and then pulled up with an injury in the warm-up. I was livid, honestly. I was pretty triggered by that event. I had to calm myself down for a little bit, came back to it later on. Obviously, I had Anderson coming off my bench. He picked up a 0-pointer, of course. So Saka's been absolutely useless to me. And now there's a question mark as to whether or not he's going to be fit moving forwards. I've kind of held on to him with the double game week in mind, just in case they do get the double game week in Game Week 26. But we don't know that for sure. We'll know that after tomorrow evening, with the Arsenal-Chelsea Carabao Cup semi-final being played. And also we'll get more information on Saka as well, because we'll see whether or not he's fit based on whether or not he starts that game, because it is really important to them. So Saka's frustrating. We will be talking about him as a potential transfer out later on in the video. I ended up captaining Bruno Fernandes. It was a last-minute call. I mentioned on my previous video, I was very 50-50 between Haaland and Fernandes. In the end, it was partly gut instinct, but also partly because I'm not completely content with my rank at the moment, around 300k. I don't feel like I need to force any risks, but in the 50-50 calls, I think I'm going to start looking more towards the lower owned players. So Fernandes, I assumed, would have the lower effective ownership. I thought it was a very tight call. I think even if I was in the top 10k right now, I would have still been very tempted to go with Fernandes. But I think that was maybe the tilting factor, that I was chasing a little bit, and I knew Haaland would have the higher effective ownership. So I went with Fernandes, got away with it. Haaland obviously got the assist after like 11 minutes, and I was panicking badly. Of course, Semenyo also scoring didn't help in that game, but I just about survived that one. I don't know how Man City didn't win that game against Spurs, but Spurs, fantastic comeback in the second half, of course. Elsewhere, Enzo Fernandez in for Szoboszlai got me 8 points with that last-minute goal. Really wish he didn't take his shirt off at the end, but 8 points is absolutely fine. And yet again, I've got to mention Elliot Anderson. What a great value pick he has been. No attacking returns to speak of in this game, and no clean sheet either. And he still came away with maximum bonus points, DEFCON, 7-pointer from him. And he's, I think, now hit, is it 24 points in the last 4 game weeks? That's 6 points a week. That's really good value, especially from someone who does have the potential for attacking returns. I've even got a sneaky suspicion he might be on penalties moving forwards as well. Obviously, that is speculation at best. But he's just great value. I'm so happy to own him, and he has been one player that hasn't let me down recently. Thiago has. My transfers, striker-wise, have been awful this season. I think I've done the exact opposite of what I could have done with Thiago and Ekitike to get me maximum points, and I've ended up holding Thiago for all of his blanks before he hit the hat-trick and the brace in back-to-back weeks, sold him for those games for Ekitike, who then went on a streak of scoring nothing after getting, I think, back-to-back braces before I bought him, and then reversed the transfer again, and Ekitike's gone and bagged a brace a couple of weeks after I sold him as well. And Thiago, of course, has started blanking again. So probably poor decision making, but I was following the fixtures for most of it. And obviously I brought Thiago in last week to help me afford Bruno Fernandes as a last minute switch from Foden. So there were other elements at play there. But either way, that second striker has been a real burden for me and has not picked me up any points pretty much all the way through since I wildcarded now. So very, very frustrating. But with all of that in mind, I'm still optimistic that this will be a green arrow going into game week 25, which would be back-to-back. If Dubravka and Alderete can do something, if it's a 0-0 draw, I'm laughing. If Alderete can pick up some defcons, maybe get a goal, obviously it cancels out Dubravka's clean sheet. But there are a few different combinations that could get me a decent green arrow. Obviously, I should probably mention, and I've gone on too long on this section already, but I should mention my keeper decision with who I started this week. I went with Dubravka. Let's see. It could be that he outscores Kelleher. It looks unlikely considering Kelleher has picked up a 10-pointer with a clean sheet against Aston Villa. As mentioned, I thought it was a tight enough call between Dubravka and Kelleher. And away at Aston Villa didn't fill me with confidence. Aston Villa have been very good and I'm playing Rodgers. So it felt like, again, the upside was fairly limited there if I played them both. I went with Rodgers over Kelleher because it just did not seem logical to be benching Rodgers. And obviously Rodgers has blanked. Kelleher has hauled. It's quite painful, but let's see what Dubravka can do. Even if he picks up a 4 or 5 pointer, I'd be happy enough. Obviously, it's points left on my bench. It's not great. But what can you do? It's gone. I can't redo that decision, and hopefully I can make a better decision in Game Week 25 with my keepers. Okay, so rather than moving into my team for Game Week 25 without any transfers, I'm going to run straight into my transfer plans because there are a few different combinations that I might be considering. Even though I've got only one free transfer, a lot hangs on the result tomorrow evening and the information we get around that result regarding Bukayo Saka's fitness on whether or not Arsenal have Saka to rely on over the next few game weeks, but also whether or not they have the double game week, or if that double game week goes towards Chelsea and Everton. So, first off, the scenario in which Arsenal do progress in the Carabao Cup and make it through to the final would mean that Wolves comes forward as a fixture to game week 26, giving them a double game week. I would have loved to have Bukayo Saka for that. I thought he would be a pretty good differential captain. The data is still good, as frustrating as that is because he's not returning on it whatsoever. But the data is there. And given that they've got the FA Cup 4th round fixture against Wigan between Brentford and what would be the Wolves fixture, I thought his minutes would be really secure for that. So I was actually pretty confident about Saka for game week 26. So let's wait and see. I don't want to get rid of him if he's not going to be a problem. If he's straight back in the 11 against Chelsea in the midweek, then I'm probably not going to be selling him, to be honest. But if he's not in the 11, and if Arteta is a little bit cagey about whether or not he's back, I need to have plans in place to get rid of him, because I absolutely need to guarantee myself a triple Arsenal combination for double game week 26 if they get there. I'm not going to spend too long on this section. I would go straight to Declan Rice. I could consider Madueke, but I think just for reliability, for a player I'd want to own after game week 26 as well, Declan Rice just seems to be the obvious safe pick. He's at a decent value. He's not returned very well recently, but I still think there's a decent player in there, FPL-wise. Obviously, we know he's a fantastic player in real life anyway. So if Saka is out, or we get no real news or update about his fitness and he doesn't make the Carabao Cup semi-final and they progress, then I think Rice is the obvious transfer, given that they would get the double game week because they made it through in the Carabao Cup semi-final. Obviously, the fixtures afterwards aren't ideal, but Rice will just tick along pretty nicely. It's not the most exciting transfer, but it's one that I think if Arsenal do progress, that needs to be made. Okay, so of course, Arsenal progressing in the Carabao Cup semi-final isn't the only thing that could happen tomorrow evening. Chelsea could overturn that deficit, and if they do and make it through to the final, then Arsenal wouldn't get the double game week, but Chelsea and Everton both would. Now, if that happens, I think I need to have a completely different plan with Bukayo Saka. I would not be as interested in Declan Rice. I think he'll still be fine, and if you've got him, I really would not be too worried. Even without the double game week, it's a decent run of fixtures. But given that I don't already have him, and if Saka is indeed out, or to be honest, even if he's not, I would still be tempted to remove him, given that he's not been great value for money. The minutes don't look anywhere near as secure as they have done in recent seasons. And if they don't get the double game week either, I might be able to use that money better elsewhere. So regardless of his fitness, actually, I might be tempted to get rid of him if Arsenal don't go through in the Carabao Cup semi-final. There are a lot of options that I'm considering if Saka is a sell and if they don't get the double game week. The one that probably stands out the most as the obvious transfer is probably Cole Palmer, given that he played 90 minutes in game week 24. He did miss the game before that, but again, previous to that, he played 90 minutes as well. So he has proven that he can play the matches. I am very nervous about whether or not he starts all of these upcoming games. Wolves away, Leeds at home, Everton away as well, if they get the double, of course, and Burnley at home. I'm still just not massively convinced that he plays all of those games. Of course, the Arsenal game in the Carabao Cup semi-final is of utmost importance, so he'll probably play in that one as well. Of course, yet to be seen. There's just a lot of matches there. He has struggled to play more than once a week recently. The upside's great. He will be on penalties when he's on the pitch, and the fixtures look fantastic. I'm just not massively convinced that he is capable of playing all of those minutes. So he is on my radar. I will consider him, and obviously we'll get more information out of the Arsenal game in the midweek as well. If he plays 90 in that one and looks fine towards the end of the game, if anything, that maybe convinces me that he is probably playable in all of these fixtures, because that would prove that he's able to do back-to-back 90 minutes with, I think, a 3-day turnaround, which would not be that bad. So Palmer is on my radar, not right at the top of my list right now because I've got the doubts over the expected minutes. And I do already have Enzo Fernandez as well, so I don't desperately need to get that extra Chelsea midfielder in there just yet. But I would have my eye on him. After that, I'll quickly mention Njai as well, who, of course, if Chelsea progress, Everton would also get the double game week because their fixture against Chelsea gets brought forward. So Njai might be another decent option at a good price point on penalties, very good minutes, decent enough underlying attacking data for the price. I don't love the next few fixtures, though, it must be said. And Everton, from an attacking point of view, have not been at their best recently. They're obviously missing key players. Jack Grealish sadly out for the rest of the season, it looks like. So I do wonder how much that weakens them. And Njai has always been sort of on my radar since he came back from the African Cup of Nations, but I've also always found other players I slightly prefer over him. I think that might still be the case here, but the swinging factor here might be if Everton do also get the double game week, it will be pretty tempting to pile into Everton as well. Defensively too, but Njai would be a nice option on penalties. You never know. You might get lucky, even if Everton have two horrific performances, he might get a penalty in one or both of the games, and all of a sudden you're looking at 15 to 20 points from him from barely doing anything. So the upside is there. I'd also maybe consider Dewsbury Hall. If they got the double, very, very cheap, would help me afford other things. But if I'm getting rid of Saka anyway, there's not a lot of other players that I really need the money for. So I think I'd probably go with the penalty taker. And then we move on to the other 4 players on this spreadsheet. Semenyo, Mbeumo, Sarr and Wirtz are all in consideration as a Saka replacement, none of which would have the double game week, which might put me off slightly. But each of them have their own merits. Semenyo, since he came into the City team, has been fantastic from a goal-scoring point of view. I've seen a few Man City fans on social, on X, on Blue Sky, saying that his second half performance was not a great one in game week 24 against Spurs, but he did come away with another goal. His goal scoring record this season, as we know, has been amazing, obviously bolstered by penalties when he was at Bournemouth. That is no longer the case. but he's continued that rich vein of goal scoring form since he came to Man City. So he is in my thinking. He's also very highly owned, which is another factor that I probably shouldn't use too strongly in my thinking, but it is something that plays on my mind a little bit. I am very exposed to Semenyo every week. When he scored this week, it really damaged my rank. So if I think he's a good pick and he's level in my mind with someone like Saar or Wirtz, who are much lower owned, I might be tempted to go with Semenyo just to cover off risk a little bit. On the flip side, like I said with captaincy earlier, if I'm chasing, maybe I do take a gamble against him and say, you know what, he's higher owned. I'm betting that he'll lose his place in the starting 11 or get limited minutes at some point, or the returns will just dry up. And I'll go against that high ownership, and it gives me much more of a springboard to rise through the ranks if it goes my way. Of course, it can go both ways. Moving past Semenyo, and Mbeumo, I think, was my instinct as the best player to be bringing in before we got to game week 24, if I was to have to remove someone like Bukayo Saka. The fixtures are really good. Spurs at home, West Ham away. Obviously not a double game week, but it's still a good single game week fixture in 26, followed by Everton away, Crystal Palace at home. And unlike someone like Semenyo or potentially Palmer, Njai or Saar, if the double game weeks go a certain way, he won't have a blank in game week 31. So it's not a transfer out in the future. Whereas if Chelsea get the double, both Everton and Chelsea would blank in game week 31. So if I bought Palmer or Njai, they're a sell ahead of game week 31. Same goes for Semenyo and Saar if Man City progress in the Carabao Cup. And that's looking likely, by the way. They're obviously beating Newcastle in the first leg. If they do progress, they will blank in game week 31 as well. So all of the players I've mentioned so far, Palmer, Njai, Semenyo, they probably, if I'm interested in Palmer and Njai, it's because they double in game week 26 and therefore they blank later on. And Mbeumo, that's not the case. I can just play him all the way through to when I plan on wildcarding. And the fixtures are good. The data's very good. I am pretty tempted with Mbeumo. I will also mention Ismaila Sarr. There's an extra reason why I like him at the moment, and that is because Mateta looks likely to go off to, I think it's AC Milan at time of recording. I think he's had a medical booked. So with that in mind, we were all wondering, well, who's going to be on penalties for Crystal Palace? The answer is Ismaila Sarr, as we found out in game week 24. And it just so happens that they're coming into some pretty fantastic fixtures themselves, especially from game week 26. So Brighton away, not bad. It's the rivalry, of course. So not an easy game by any means, but you wouldn't be shocked if he got attacking returns in that one, followed by Burnley and Wolves, both at home, then Man United after that. It's a good run of fixtures. Palace are struggling a bit, but Sarr's data's good, and he's now on penalties for a cut price as well. So I think he's a good pick, but of course, he could very easily have a blank in game week 31 as well. Obviously tied into the Man City result for the Carabao Cup semi-final because they play each other in game week 31. So I really like him, but I do have it in the back of my mind that he would also have to be a sell ahead of game week 31. Finally, Wirtz is coming onto my radar quite quickly at the moment because he's been fantastic recently. Man City at home doesn't logically jump out as a great fixture on paper, but they've been quite leaky. And I do kind of back Liverpool to get a goal or two in that game. And if they do, everything is starting to run through Florian Wirtz. Been really impressed by him. They've got some good fixtures, especially after Man City is out the way. And the data's looking pretty good as well. I think with Wirtz, though, the problem is you're looking at almost identical data to someone like Ismaila Sarr. I would just about say that Sarr's fixtures are a little bit better, and he's much cheaper and on penalties. So that's maybe the swinging factor with Wirtz right now. I think he's a good pick, but because of his price, when he's going up against other players and teams that might double in game week 26 and other players with similar data but also penalties, I'm not sure if he stands out as a better pick than them. But at the same time, I think he's fantastic and he has played really well recently, and I can see him returning in any of the next 4 or 5 game weeks. So he's on my radar as well. I think if I was really forced to make a decision right now, without the information of who progresses in the Carabao Cup semi-final, I think I'd go with Mbeumo. But it's a very close call. And then obviously everything will change depending on whether Arsenal or Chelsea progress. Okay, finally, before looking at my team going into game week 25, a quick word on another transfer. That is playing on my mind a little bit. I will say I'm unlikely to make this one ahead of the other moves I've suggested. I think Saka is the more obvious sell if he is indeed injured. But my strikers have been a constant cause of concern for me ever since I wildcarded all the way back in game week 8, I think it was. Thiago, great underlying data, 0.63. The next two fixtures are not nice. Newcastle away, Arsenal at home. I will say, though, after that, they've got a great little run all the way through to when I plan on wildcarding in game week 32. So it's whether or not I just want to hold on to him for the next couple of game weeks, whether I can maybe put him on my bench for a week or two and just have him in place in my team ready for the fixtures to turn again. If I was looking at selling him, and again, I will say it's relatively unlikely, but if I've not got that Saka problem and if Arsenal do double, then I'm probably not going to remove him if he's fit. So I do have a transfer to use. I could get rid of Thiago and I could chase the upside on someone like João Pedro. He was benched in game week 24 and then he came off the bench and scored and assisted and got a 10-pointer. Really frustrating as a non-owner. If you're an owner, you're loving it, I'm sure. Next up is Wolves. After that, potentially the double game week. And after that, Burnley as well. So he is tempting. The ownership is rising very quickly. So it is playing on my mind maybe to look at João Pedro, especially if they do get the double game week. So that is on my mind. After that, though, Jarrod Bowen has also been impressive recently. They've got Burnley next up, a good fixture. And of course, without Paqueta in the squad anymore, Bowen's on penalties. So that data is going to start looking a lot better very soon. And there are decent fixtures there. Burnley, Man United at home, Bournemouth at home, even Liverpool away. I'm not massively worried about that. Liverpool haven't been tight at the back. So I think Bowen's also a good pick. And like I always say with Bowen, he's never a bad pick because 90 minutes, now he's on penalties as well, does boost him a little bit. He's so talismanic for West Ham. If they score and you get the notification on your phone, if you're not watching the game, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be Bowen that flashes up on your phone. So I do like Jarrod Bowen. The other option is to downgrade the position altogether, go with either Krupi or Mane. I've put Krupi because he just continues to impress, scored yet again. The minutes are shaky and he gets 60 to 70 per week. But what he does in that time is pretty impressive. And at the price he's at, it's good value for money as well. What I will say is, I don't really need the spare money for anything at the moment. So given that I could hold Thiago on my bench for a week or two, I think I'm quite likely to hold on to him. If Chelsea double, then Pedro really does come into my thinking. But at time of recording, that's the less likely scenario. So I think I'm probably going to be holding on to Thiago for now. Okay, so wrapping up with my team as it currently stands ahead of Game Week 25. One free transfer, as I've mentioned, 1 million in the bank. And hopefully that red arrow turns green tonight after the Burnley-Sunderland game. But we'll see. Either way, it won't be a big red arrow or probably won't be a big green arrow. This will be just about the situation going into Game Week 25. I'm currently lining up in a 4-5-1. I do have another keeper dilemma this week between Dubravka and Kelleher. I think Dubravka at home to West Ham is a good enough fixture to be starting him ahead of Kelleher away at Newcastle. But it's definitely not a clear-cut decision and it could come back to bite me yet again. I'm currently starting Dubravka though. Let's see how he performs against Sunderland. If he has a shocker, then I might be tempted to move it back to Kelleher. But I'm pretty happy either way there. Into my defence, all home fixtures, double Arsenal again, Everton at home for Fulham, so Anderson's got a decent fixture there. Everton have been struggling a little bit in front of goal, and Hall at home to Brentford. Now, Hall at home to Brentford is the dilemma here because I could go the other way and start Thiago away at Newcastle, so obviously they go up against each other. And Thiago is a 90-minute penalty taker, talismanic. We've just talked about the data. It's not a great fixture, but if anyone's going to break that Newcastle clean sheet, it would be him. And then that would be really painful if I've got him on my bench and Hall starting. So I'm really torn. I'm really 50-50 between those two as to which one to start. And I think I doubt I'm going to start both of them because it limits the upside. But I suppose I could. There are other players that I could potentially bench. But either way, that's the dilemma there. Into the midfield, I'm pretty confident I'm going to be captaining Bruno Fernandes. Fantastic performance yet again in Game Week 24. Good home fixture against Spurs. And Haaland is away at Liverpool. So not worth selling in my mind just yet, especially because I have no idea where I'd be spending the money. but probably not a captainable fixture in comparison to Spurs at home for Fernandes, that is. My other four in midfield, Enzo Fernandez away at Wolves, perfectly happy. Rodgers away at Bournemouth. He's been a bit frustrating to own so far, but I think that's a pretty good game. I have that one down as a bit of a basketball game, quite end to end. I can see spaces opening up for Rodgers. So I think it's a good one for him. Elliot Anderson's going nowhere away at Leeds. He'll get 4 or 5 points again. Very happy with that. And then Saka is, of course, the dilemma. Now, there is an argument to say, if he's a doubt going into Game Week 25 and we don't know either way, and we do know that Arsenal progress and get that double in 26, if I think that there's a decent chance that he's fit again by Game Week 26, I could hold on to him and just let Thiago come off my bench. It would give me Thiago versus Hall, but it's not a bad player to be coming off the bench if it is him that I do indeed choose to be on the bench in the first place. I'm going to give Saka all the chance in the world to be available for this match and hopefully for Game Week 26 as well. But like I mentioned, I have plans in place for if he's not fit or is a significant doubt, or indeed if Arsenal don't get the double game week in 26 and it goes Chelsea's way. So with that in mind, maybe it's a roll, maybe it's using one free transfer to get rid of Saka, depending on whether or not they get through. And obviously, depending on whether or not they get through, it will be different routes and different transfer plans, as I discussed in the video. Either way, though, I think I'm pretty well set up for Game Week 25. Definitely not ideal, but I think I'm in a decent enough spot. So fingers crossed for a green arrow this week. And I'll be back in the next couple of days to run through my transfer tips and my team ahead of Game Week 25. In the meantime, hopefully you've enjoyed it. Leave a like if you have. Hit subscribe if you're new around here. And I'll see you next time.